Here's something that might surprise you. Disney generates over $54 billion annually in merchandise sales related to their entertainment properties. But what if a company could build that kind of storytelling empire from day one, starting with both content and products simultaneously?
Think about this for a moment. Product placement specifically. The global market was valued at approximately $20.9 billion in 2022 and is projected to reach around $37.9 billion by 2032.
What's particularly notable is how this merchandise revenue often exceeds the direct box office or content distribution revenue. For major franchise films, merchandise sales can generate 2 to 5 times more revenue than ticket sales. Star Wars, for example, has generated over $42 billion in merchandise sales over its lifetime, compared to approximately $10 billion in box office revenue.
That's such an intriguing concept. How would a company even begin to tackle something that ambitious?
Well, this fascinating outdoor lifestyle startup company is attempting exactly that. They're hoping to launch with both a screenplay and an MPV product that is their cornerstone within an innovative product ecosystem. It's a completely different approach to building a brand.
So they're not just bolting on storytelling after the fact like most companies do?
Exactly right. Think about how Yeti had to spend millions building their brand story after they were already successful selling coolers. Tymmber Outdoor is projecting its media business revenue could be between $150 to $350 million, plus another $40.5 million from their MVP product by year 5.
Those are some impressive numbers and seem incredibly optimistic. But how does this actually work in practice?
It's ambitious, but not impossible. They referenced Arthur the King as a comparable title, which made around $32 million on a $19 million budget. But they're thinking bigger. They're looking at the content as a platform to launch an ongoing TV series, which is where the real revenue potential comes in.
Like what we saw with Yellowstone creating demand for Western wear and ranch lifestyle products?
Precisely. And look at what Emily in Paris did for French fashion brands, or how The Bear influenced restaurant merchandise. Those shows weren't created to sell products, but they generated massive commercial impact. What Tymmber is proposing is harnessing that potential.
So they're creating what they call a dual-engine revenue model. The entertainment content generates revenue through streaming deals and licensing, while their hardware products, which maintain above-average profit margins, create ongoing revenue streams. And here's what's clever. Each side feeds into the other.
You know what this reminds me of? It's like how Red Bull built their media empire around extreme sports, except they had to do it backwards.
That's exactly it. And look at the timing. They're targeting a $5.6 trillion global health and wellness adventure market at a moment when people are increasingly valuing health and experiences over possessions. Plus, with the remote work revolution, there's unprecedented demand for outdoor lifestyle solutions.
From where I sit, hardware development costs make sense. Their approach to graduated product releases and their margins look solid. But $12 million for the film production piece seems high for something that's essentially going to be brand content, doesn't it?
Not necessarily. This isn't branded content in the traditional sense. What they're proposing is a legitimate independent film production with recognizable talent that could potentially get theatrical distribution or a streaming deal. The $12 million budget puts it in the lower mid-range for indie films with commercial potential.
But is that realistic? Can they actually execute a quality film on that budget that people would watch as entertainment, not just as a glorified product commercial?
Based on the screenplay pages I've seen, absolutely. It's a character-driven story first, with themes of pursuing your dreams and building a meaningful life. The outdoor products are integrated organically into the narrative. It has this modern spy thriller element layered over an authentic outdoor lifestyle journey.
In my experience, what they're proposing is actually the reverse of traditional product placement. Instead of awkwardly inserting products into a story, they're building narrative around genuine lifestyle moments where the products naturally belong.
Well, that makes me wonder about the data side of things. How do they plan to measure success?
That's actually one of the most innovative aspects. By owning both the entertainment and product sides, they get unprecedented insight into their customers. They can track not just what products people buy, but what stories resonate and why. According to Havas Media, meaningful brands outperform the market by 134%.
So it's really about building a community around a lifestyle, isn't it?
Precisely.
Looking ahead, what could this mean for the future of brand building?
Well, I think we're looking at a potential paradigm shift. In today's digital age, traditional advertising is becoming less effective. When you can create genuine emotional connections through storytelling while delivering high-quality products that support that narrative, you're building something much more valuable than just another brand.
That's fascinating. It really does seem like they're creating an entirely new category of lifestyle company.
And that's why this model is so compelling for investors. It's not just about potential financial returns. It's about getting in on the ground floor of what could be a completely new way of building billion-dollar brands in the experience economy. When you look at how Disney built their merchandising empire, or how Yeti created their brand story, this approach could potentially get there faster and more efficiently. This economic reality is precisely what makes the Tymmber Outdoor business model potentially valuable. Integrating product development with storytelling from the ground up creates multiple reinforcing revenue streams that can potentially exceed what either approach could generate independently.
The whole thing really shows how much the consumer landscape has evolved, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. In a world where consumers are increasingly seeking meaning and authentic connections, this integrated approach could very well be the future of successful brand building. It's not just about selling products or telling stories. It's about creating a complete ecosystem where each element reinforces and enhances the other. And that's what makes this such a fascinating case study in modern brand building.
If this sounds intriguing to you, then keep listening as we turn our podcast over to our friends at Google's Notebook Deep Dive podcast, where they really dig into Tymmber Outdoors, pitch, and vision.
And check out their reaction to the movie Tymmber Reunion, that is born out of their initial script, Living on Hopes and Dreams, where they believe this movie has the potential to become the next Yellowstone TV series. Spoiler alert, you're in for a ride.
Enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Oh, and I almost forgot. Be sure to stay to the end as the deep dive hosts react to the screenplay. Living on Hopes and Dreams, based on a true real-life story about our entrepreneur as they challenge us with some deep thought-provoking questions.
Today, we're going to be diving into something pretty unique. We've got a business plan here for a company called Tymmber Outdoor. And they've got some pretty ambitious plans to create a whole new American lifestyle brand.
Interesting.
And it all revolves around this
Okay.
kind of interesting idea.
Great.
A system of outdoor products, which are all designed for what they're calling a continuous outdoor lifestyle journey.
Does that even mean?
That's a good question. And that's what we're going to be exploring today
Okay.
in this deep dive.
Sounds good.
We've got movie plots. We've got sustainable tech, entrepreneurial ambition. We've got maybe even some potential pitfalls,
Okay.
all packed into this plan.
So they're really trying to, it sounds like, cover all the bases with this.
We really are going for it, yeah.
What immediately stands out to me is just the sheer scope of their ambition. It's not like they're just trying to sell you a tent or a cooler here.
Right.
They want to be with you, like, from your first tailgate party all the way to your off-grid retirement in a self-powered, tiny home.
Yeah, I was struck by that too.
Yeah.
They're trying to capture like the entire life cycle of outdoor enthusiasts, you know,
Right.
from those early days when you're like a kid and you're just exploring your own backyard,
Yeah.
all the way to potentially living in that backyard full time when you're older.
Yeah, well, from a business perspective, it's a pretty clever strategy, I think.
Yeah.
Instead of chasing trends, they're aiming to kind of build this loyal customer base
Yeah.
that grows and evolves with them. The big question is, can they actually deliver on this promise, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's unpack this continuous outdoor lifestyle journey.
Yeah, let's dive in.
See what they've actually come up with, right? So Tymmber Outdoor, they break down their vision into 4 key areas, they say.
Okay.
Building a new American lifestyle, creating engaging content, focusing on innovation and sustainability and disrupting the market.
Okay.
So they seem to think these things are all, kind of connected.
Yeah. I mean, those are pretty big, pretty broad categories.
Yeah.
Where do you think we should start?
Where do we start? Well, I think their decision to launch the whole brand with a movie
Oh, yeah, that's right. The movie.
is the most intriguing part of the whole plan.
Yeah, that definitely caught my eye, too.
Right. It's not every day you see a business plan.
It's certainly not the traditional route.
That includes producing a Hollywood-style action movie,
Like this, yeah.
So they're calling it Tymmber Reunion.
Okay.
And the plot involves a retired spy
Interesting.
who fakes his own death
Wow.
to pursue his passion for building outdoor gear.
Okay, so we're talking like a real action movie here.
Yeah, I mean, they're really going for it.
Okay, all right. I mean, it sounds a little bit out there, but I can see the logic behind it.
Okay.
They're trying to tap into that sense of like adventure and escapism, you know, the things that draw people to the outdoors in the first place.
Right.
And a movie, especially one with, a compelling storyline and like high production value, that can be a really powerful way to connect with consumers.
Yeah.
Like on an emotional level.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to build a whole universe
That really is.
around their brand.
Yeah, it goes beyond just the movie, too.
Oh, really?
I mean, they're talking about spin-offs, social media content, maybe even like a children's series down the line.
Wow. Okay, so they're thinking long-term.
Yeah, they're taking inspiration from things like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh, wow.
And Star Wars.
Yeah.
All that merchandise and that built-in fan base.
That's a big
No,
swing.
but is it realistic for an outdoor brand?
Right. Those are some pretty big shoes to fill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's ambitious, for sure.
Yeah.
And they're going to need, I think, like a really strong story. Compelling characters.
Yeah.
To pull it off. It's not enough to just like slap your logo on a product and hope that it sells. Because it was in a movie.
I think they're going to have to, really create a genuinely engaging story that resonates with, their target audience, right? If they do that, I think this movie could be a springboard for like something much, much bigger.
So big on storytelling.
Yeah, they're going for it with the storytelling.
Sneaking in these ideas about sustainability and community building, but under this guise of like action and intrigue.
Okay, so sneaking in their message, it sounds like a Trojan horse.
Exactly. They're really trying to win over a global audience through this.
It's a big gamble, though, right? I mean, can they really create that same level of fandom that Star Wars has and, translate that into actual product sales?
Right. That remains to be seen. But it's clear that they are drawing inspiration from like these big, successful merchandise empires like Star Wars and Marvel. Yeah. And they're betting that a good story will create this connection, this emotional connection with their brand. And then people will, want to buy into the lifestyle, not just like a one-off product.
The Tymmber lifestyle. I like it.
Yeah.
So it's about more than just the gear. It's about, the feeling of belonging, of being a part of this bigger thing.
Exactly. And they're not just like throwing out, these aspirations. Like they have a pretty concrete plan for how they're going to bring all this to life. What about the actual products, though? What kind of gear are we talking about here?
Yeah, let's talk about the products. So they've outlined a pretty extensive product roadmap here that covers everything from like your basic tailgating essentials all the way to, as we said, a self-powered tiny home.
Right.
And it's all designed to be modular and work together as a system.
Interesting.
Which is another interesting aspect of their approach.
Yeah, that system idea. Yeah. That really jumped out at me.
Yeah, they're not just selling like individual pieces of gear.
Right.
It's like they're trying to create an interconnected ecosystem where everything works together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's pretty ambitious, to say the least.
Yeah, it really is. What do you think is the most intriguing part about their business plan?
I think what really stands out is how Tymmber is tackling planned obsolescence.
Okay, yeah, I see that right here in their business plan.
You buy a tent, and then you use it a few times, then it ends up sitting in your garage. Or even worse, it ends up in a landfill. Same with the grill, you buy a kayak, all this stuff. And it's like they're betting on the fact that maybe consumers are getting tired of all that.
So instead of having a garage full of all this like single-use gear, you have this curated collection of Tymmber products that are designed to work together.
Yeah. Exactly. And they're really focused on multifunctionality, durability, but importantly, I think they're really focusing on enjoyment too. They want to make the outdoors more appealing, more easy to get into, for everybody.
Yeah, more sustainable, too. It definitely looks like sustainability is a big part of their mission.
Yeah.
But who exactly are they targeting with this vision? I mean, is this just for the hardcore outdoor enthusiast?
When you look at their marketing materials and the way they're talking about their audience, it seems like they're actually going after a pretty wide range of people. They mention families a lot, people at different stages of life, even people who right now might not even consider themselves outdoorsy.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting. They're actually planning on using AI.
AI for selling outdoor gear. That's a new one.
To personalize the customer journey from awareness all the way to recommending certain products and ongoing support.
Okay, hold on. Walk me through this. What do you mean?
Imagine a system that learns your preferences, how active you are, what your budget is, and then it's going to recommend the perfect Tymmber gear for whatever you want to do.
Okay, that's actually pretty clever. It's a pretty slick use of AI.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, we have this grand vision, right?
Yeah.
Of a new American lifestyle built around outdoor adventure and sustainable living, launched with a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there are some serious technical hurdles and a lot of big promises that they have to live up to.
Right. Where do you,
Yeah, where are they most vulnerable?
yeah, what's the biggest risk they're taking, you think?
I think the biggest risk they're taking is that
Yeah, okay.
the fantasy they're creating in the movie
Right.
doesn't actually match up with
Right.
what they're offering in their products.
Right.
I mean, I think consumers are pretty savvy these days.
Yeah.
They'll see right through.
They'll see through the smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, any kind of marketing hype
Yeah.
that doesn't, align with the
Yes.
actual performance and value of their products.
The products have to live up to the hype.
Yeah. What about the technology behind the casita?
Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, is that feasible?
Is it, are they pushing the boundaries too far there?
Yeah, potentially.
Well, their microgrid system, it's definitely innovative.
Yeah.
And they're drawing inspiration from a field that's, rapidly evolving. But taking that technology and actually putting it into a home, that's a whole other challenge,
Yeah, it's a different beast altogether.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So they need to demonstrate that this system is reliable, affordable, and easy to use if they want to convince people to invest in this vision of off-grid living.
Okay. So basically, they need to convince us that this isn't just science fiction.
Right.
This is a viable way to live.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I guess that's a good place for us to start. Kind of digging deeper, right?
Yeah, let's get into the details.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this microgrid system.
Okay.
See what they've come up with.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this microgrid system. They're calling it the Casita microgrid.
Okay.
And it's designed to be a completely self-sufficient power solution for these tiny homes.
So from what I understand, it's not just solar panels on the roof.
Right.
They're using an electric vehicle motor
Yeah.
to drive an alternator. How does that even work?
It's a really clever approach, actually.
Oh.
So instead of needing a massive solar array to generate enough power for a home, they're using a relatively modest number of panels to power an EV motor. And that motor then spins the alternator, which produces a much higher electrical output.
Oh, so they're essentially amplifying the power generated by the solar panels using the EV motor as a middleman.
Yeah, you got it. And then any excess energy that's generated is stored in a dedicated EV battery bank, which it can then be used, during nighttime hours or when it's cloudy. So it's like a hybrid system that combines the best of both worlds, right?
Yeah.
You've got the clean energy of solar, but you've also got the storage capacity and the efficiency of an EV powertrain.
That sounds incredibly efficient. But what about the practical side of things? How much power are we talking about here?
Right.
Can the system really run all the appliances in a home?
That's a great question, and it's one that Tymmber Outdoor addresses directly in their plan. They claim that this system can power everything from your lights and appliances to your heating and cooling systems and even a water heater.
Okay.
They've designed it, they say, to meet the energy needs of a modern, comfortable home, all while operating off-grid.
Okay, so they're saying it's possible, But is it practical?
Right.
Are there any downsides to this approach?
Well, there are always trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
One potential challenge I see is the upfront cost.
Okay.
Integrating this level of technology into a home,
Right.
it's not going to be cheap. And they're still reliant on battery technology, which, while it's improving rapidly, can be expensive to replace and has a limited lifespan.
Right. And what about maintenance? Is this something that, like, the average homeowner will be able to handle?
Yeah.
Or are they going to have to call in, like, a specialized technician every time something goes wrong?
That's a crucial consideration.
Yeah.
And they haven't really provided a lot of detail about the maintenance requirements of the system.
Right.
But it's definitely something that, potential buyers are going to want to know more about.
Yeah, for sure. So it seems like this microgrid system is like a core part of their vision for sustainable living. They're betting big on this idea that consumers are going to be willing to invest in this type of technology. Do you think that's a realistic bet?
I think it depends on a few factors. First, they need to prove that the technology works.
Yeah.
As promised, right? And that it's reliable over the long term.
Okay.
Second, they need to make it affordable. And third, they need to make it easy to use and maintain. If they can tick those boxes, they might be onto something.
They're tapping into this, like, growing interest in self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
And sustainable living, right?
Absolutely.
Like people who are looking for ways to reduce their environmental impact.
Yeah.
And maybe even gain a little independence from the traditional power grid.
Yeah, and that's a trend that I think is only going to accelerate in the coming years. But, they're not the only ones out there. There are other companies that are exploring these off-grid solutions. Tymmber Outdoor is not operating in a vacuum. They're going to need to differentiate themselves and offer something truly unique if they want to stand out in this increasingly crowded market.
You mentioned earlier that their product roadmap
kind
of culminates with these self-powered casita homes. But they're starting with, more conventional outdoor gear.
Yeah, like the tents and the...
Yeah, where does that fit into the overall picture?
It seems like their strategy is to kind of build brand loyalty from the ground up, starting with products that are more accessible and familiar to, like the average outdoor enthusiast. Things like the RAA tailgate system, their canopy, their storage solutions.
Yeah, and they've got this whole suite of products that are designed to integrate with each other and create like a more seamless outdoor experience. And they're using those products to kind of tell a story, to build an image of, like the Tymmber lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a smart approach. Start with something that people understand. Build trust and excitement around the brand, and then gradually introduce them to the more like ambitious and futuristic aspects of your vision.
Right.
But they need to make sure that those early products are truly exceptional.
Yeah, they got to deliver.
Otherwise, their whole continuous outdoor lifestyle journey could fizzle out before it even gets started.
All right, so the pressure is on to deliver. They need to create products that not only live up to the hype that they're generating with this movie, but also stand out in a really competitive market. But let's not forget about, like, the elephant in the room, the despair economy.
Right.
They're tying their vision to this idea that people are disillusioned with traditional systems and looking for a way out.
Yeah. I mean, is that just marketing speak, or is there something more to it?
I think they're tapping into, like, a real sentiment that's out there. You know, we've seen a lot of upheaval in recent years, and there's a growing sense of disillusionment with, like, traditional institutions and systems. People are looking for alternatives, ways to take control of their lives and create like a more sustainable and fulfilling future.
Right.
And they see outdoor living and specifically their Tymmber lifestyle as a solution.
I think it's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
They're not just selling escapism. They're talking about building communities, connecting with nature, finding a sense of purpose and belonging that may be lacking in the more like conventional world. They're appealing to people who are like searching for something more, something deeper.
It's almost like they're creating a movement, like a tribe of like-minded individuals who share these values. But isn't that what like the van life movement is all about? And they seem to be kind of critical of that approach.
They see van life as like a temporary solution, kind of a cul-de-sac that ultimately leads back to the same systems and structures that people are trying to escape. They're arguing that their approach with its emphasis on building sustainable communities and homes, offers a more permanent and fulfilling alternative.
So they're drawing a distinction between like a fleeting adventure
Yeah.
and a more grounded way of life. But they're both rooted in this desire to like connect with nature and break free from like conventional constraints. It seems like they're trying to offer like a different path to a similar destination.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
But they're going to need to convince people that their path is more viable,
Right.
more sustainable, and ultimately more rewarding.
They've certainly got a lot to prove, but they're tackling some like big questions and offering some like compelling solutions. This is definitely a company to watch. What do you think is like the most crucial element for their success?
I think it all boils down to authenticity.
Okay.
They need to be genuine in their messaging, in their products, and in their commitment to sustainability. Because consumers can sniff out a marketing gimmick a mile away. If Tymmber Outdoor can walk the walk and deliver on their promises, they might just have a shot at changing the way we live, work, and play in the great outdoors.
That's a high bar to set. But I'm eager to see how they try to clear it. Let's dive into their plans for, disrupting the outdoor industry and creating like a more sustainable and equitable future. We've talked a lot about their vision and their technology. But let's get down to like brass tacks.
Yeah.
How do they actually plan to like disrupt the outdoor industry? I mean, they're taking on some pretty established players.
Yeah, they're definitely not shying away from a challenge.
No.
One of their key strategies is to shift production away from reliance on overseas manufacturing.
Okay.
They argue that the current model, with its focus on like cheap labor and mass production, it's unsustainable and ultimately leads to lower quality products.
So they're making a case for American-made gear.
Yeah, basically.
That's a pretty bold stance
What
in
is-
today's global economy.
Yeah, and it's not just about patriotism either.
Okay.
They believe that by bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., they can create jobs,
Right.
improve quality control,
Yeah.
and reduce the environmental impact associated with like shipping products across the globe.
Yeah, it's a compelling argument, but they're asking the right questions. They're challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
and they're offering a pretty compelling alternative to the way things are.
And in a world that's facing, unprecedented challenges, maybe that's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
A little bit of hope, a dash of adventure, and a whole lot of innovation.
Tymmber Outdoor is, they're definitely a company.
Yeah.
That's worth watching.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to do something truly different, and their success or failure could have like a ripple effect on the entire outdoor industry. What do you think? Will they make a splash, or will they just kind of quietly fade into the background?
It's too early to say for sure, but one thing is certain. They're making us think differently about how we live, work, and play in the great outdoors, and that's a conversation worth having.
Absolutely. And that's what the Deep Dive's all about. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
All right, so ready to dive in. Today, we're looking at living on hopes and dreams.
Okay.
And what makes this screenplay even more fascinating, I think, is that it's based on a true story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it takes us to the New Mexico desert.
Okay.
February 2021. We meet Michael, who is a 62-year-old entrepreneur,
Okay.
and he's living in his tricked-out Denali, working on his outdoor living business, Tymmber.
All right.
But things get really interesting when Michael has this unexpected encounter with Miguel, a Guatemalan migrant who got separated from his group while trying to cross into the U.S.
Wow.
And this meeting really throws Michael's carefully planned solitude into, like, complete chaos.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to be exploring some pretty heavy themes, cultural clashes, what it means to pursue the American dream,
Right.
the ethics surrounding immigration, and these unexpected connections that we make when we least expect them.
Yeah. You know, what struck me right away was how the screenwriter uses the New Mexico desert to kind of symbolize both like the vastness of the American dream and then also the really harsh realities of what people go through trying to achieve it.
Right.
Like it's a setting that's both beautiful and unforgiving at the same time.
Yeah, and you see that reflected in Michael's character too, right?
Yeah.
Because right away we learn that he's kind of living on the edge himself.
Yeah.
He's divorced, father of 4, hasn't seen his kids in 3 years.
Mm.
He sold his house to chase this business dream, but then COVID hit and threw a wrench in everything.
Yeah.
So he's chosen this remote location to kind of work on his business and reconnect with himself.
So it's almost like he's searching for his own version of the American dream, but it's more about finding himself than achieving some sort of financial success.
Absolutely, yeah. And then you have Miguel, who represents a completely different type of risk taker.
Right.
This guy has paid, I think it said, like $12,000 for 3 attempts to cross the border. He's separated from his group. He's lost. He's running out of hope. And his goal is to reach Miami for this promised job that's supposed to support his pregnant girlfriend and his family back in Guatemala.
Wow, talk about pressure.
Yeah. I mean, talk about high stakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought the screenplay does such a great job of capturing their initial encounter.
Yes.
It's just like full of fear, suspicion, and these stark cultural differences.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Miguel sees the American flag on Michael's Denali and immediately thinks, safety,
Right.
good guys, you know? It just reveals the certain naivete about the whole situation, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like he has this, like, almost idealized vision of America, and I wonder if that's going to be challenged throughout the story.
Totally, yeah. And then on the flip side, you have Michael, who instantly goes into, like, defense mode, right?
Uh-huh.
He hides his axe because he's unsure of Miguel's intentions.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a clash of perceptions.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, that scene really shows how fear and just assumptions we make can influence how we interact with others,
Yeah,
especially in, like, a situation that's as intense as that.
absolutely. But what I found really interesting is how their initial distrust kind of gradually shifts. I don't want to say friendship right away, but at least a grudging respect, right?
Yeah.
And we see this through these small details, like Michael builds a fire for Miguel and shares his very limited food with him.
Yeah. It's almost like those little acts of kindness start to break down the walls between them a little.
Yeah, there's this one moment I love where Michael is explaining the name of the nearby town, Truth or Consequences, to Miguel, who's just fascinated by the story behind it.
Yeah.
It's just a subtle detail, but it shows this cultural exchange happening.
Totally. And it's a good example of how screenwriter uses these, like, seemingly small moments to say something bigger about their connection. And this goes both ways, because Michael, even though he's living in New Mexico, doesn't seem to know a lot about Guatemalan culture.
Exactly. And that's where we get to learn more about Miguel's backstory, right? He starts to open up about his family, their struggles, and why he felt he had to make this dangerous journey. And I love this part. He talks about the advice his grandfather gave him.
Oh, yeah.
To always carry 3 pitchers. 1 for faith, 1 for love, and 1 for patience.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Isn't that great?
That's more than just advice, right? That's like a whole worldview,
Totally, yeah.
a way of dealing with the hard things in life.
It really is.
Maybe that's how Miguel stays hopeful in such a tough situation.
Maybe. Yeah, I think you're right. And it definitely speaks to his resilience. But, you know, the screenplay does a great job of keeping us on the edge of our seats with all these close calls.
Yeah.
Like the encounter with the Border Patrol officer.
Right.
The coyote tracks near their campsite.
Oh.
Even engine trouble caused by a pack rat.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, these moments really ratchet up the tension.
Yeah.
Not just for Michael and Miguel, but for us as the audience, too.
Totally. You can almost feel the danger closing in.
Yeah.
And it just makes you want to keep reading to see what happens next.
It creates this sense of urgency that just drives the story forward.
It really does. Yeah.
And then there's this whole internal conflict that Michael is dealing with that I found really interesting.
Uh-huh.
On the one hand, you know, he wants to help Miguel,
Yeah.
but he's also super aware of the risks involved.
Yeah.
And we see him really grappling with this when he talks to his kids and his friends who all have such different reactions.
Right.
Like his conversations with Mateo and Danny, I thought those were really telling.
Yeah. Tell me about those.
So Mateo, who's a successful Mexican-American businessman, is very cautious.
Okay.
He warns Michael about, like, the complexities of the immigration system and the potential consequences, you know, of getting involved.
Yeah. He's definitely coming at it from a more practical perspective.
Yeah,
Like thinking about the logistics and what could actually happen.
definitely. He's like the voice of reason.
Right.
But then you have Danny, who's coming from a much more compassionate viewpoint.
Okay.
And his own family has this history of helping migrants. He actually provides a safe house for those who make it to his place.
Oh, wow.
Which is a pretty powerful statement, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It really shows you how differently people approach like this idea of helping others.
Exactly. And it really highlights, I think, the fact that there are so many moral gray areas when it comes to this topic of immigration.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not always like a simple right or wrong situation.
Right.
There are a lot of different things to think about. Personal beliefs, legal issues, and even the dangers involved.
Absolutely. And I found myself struggling, honestly, with Michael's decision to actually help Miguel reach Las Cruces to meet up with his ride.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I really admire his compassion.
But on the other hand, it just feels incredibly risky, you know?
Right. What do you think?
It's tough. Is he being heroic? Or is it more like foolish?
I don't know.
I mean, I think the screenplay is very smart because it doesn't try to make Michael into this perfect hero.
Right.
You know, he's driven by empathy, but he's also maybe feeling guilty and even like wants to find some purpose in his own life, right? Like, remember when he even jokes with Miguel that he's living on the edge of a cliff?
Yeah.
That could mean a lot of different things.
It could, yeah. It's almost like he's acknowledging how unstable his own life is at that moment.
Yeah.
Both literally,
Right.
living in his truck, but also emotionally.
Yeah.
Speaking of unstable, that scene at Walmart was so well done.
Oh, tell me about it.
Michael's trying to be all inconspicuous with his sunglasses and his hat, trying to withdraw money from Miguel, who looks completely out of place in his, travel-worn clothes.
Yeah.
The tension in that scene is palpable.
Oh, I know.
I
The way the
see.
screenwriter built it up is so good.
Yeah.
You've got Curran, the cashier, giving them these looks.
Yes.
Like she knows something's up. And then that Code 99 announcement
Oh, my gosh.
over the loudspeaker freaks them both out.
Yeah. It's almost funny,
Yeah.
but it's also so suspenseful.
Right, exactly. Like a pressure cooker about to blow.
And even with all that, with the fear, with the risk, Michael goes through with it,
Right.
which I think says so much about who he is as a person.
It does, yeah. It makes you think, what would I do?
Right. Would you put yourself out there like that for a total stranger?
It's a good question.
And what's interesting is that even after this grand gesture of helping Miguel,
Yeah.
there's no guarantee of a happy ending.
Right.
The final farewell at Danny's house, it's bittersweet. We meet Fernando, another migrant who Danny's helped.
Okay.
And his story adds this whole other layer
Yeah.
to the conversation about immigration.
It really does. It makes you realize that for a lot of these people, getting to America is just the first step.
Yeah,
It's a long and uncertain road ahead.
totally. And then, just like that, Miguel's gone
Yeah.
in this dark pickup truck. And we don't know what happens to him.
It leaves you hanging, huh?
It does. It really does. It makes you wonder what happens next.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the consequences for Michael?
What happens to Miguel?
What's their future?
I like that the screenplay doesn't try to tie everything up in a neat bow.
Yeah, me too.
It lets the audience kind of sit with the weight of Michael's actions and what that might mean for both of them going forward.
It definitely makes you think about how our choices have these ripple effects.
Yeah.
Even what seems like a small thing can impact so many people.
It's not just a story about immigration.
Right.
It's a story about human connection
Absolutely.
in the face of really difficult circumstances.
Yeah. And it challenges us to examine our own ideas about what the American dream even is.
Right. Because for Miguel, it's all about hope and opportunity, building a better life. But
Yeah.
for Michael, it's more about finding his place in the world.
Right. Finding meaning when everything feels uncertain.
Exactly. So what do you think resonated with you most after reading this?
What really stayed with me?
For me, it's that contrast between the vastness of that New Mexico desert
Yeah.
and the intimacy of the relationship that developed
Okay.
between Michael and Miguel.
Uh-huh.
They're surrounded by this expansive landscape,
Yeah.
which kind of symbolizes all the unknowns they're facing,
Right.
but they create this little world within that vastness.
Yeah, I see that. And it's not just physical space,
Yes.
but emotional space too.
Yeah.
They both open up to each other, share their vulnerabilities, their fears in ways they probably wouldn't with people they've known for years.
Yeah.
And that says something about the power of shared experience, I think.
It does, yeah. It's like those circumstances force them to just be real with each other,
Yeah.
to connect on a deeper level. It made me think about how we often try to keep things separate in our lives, you know?
Right.
Like we put on different faces depending on who we're with.
Yeah.
But in this story, Michael and Miguel are stripped down to their essence.
They are.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how powerful storytelling can be. Like
Oh,
it lets us explore what it means to be human
right.
in a way that goes beyond borders and cultures.
Yeah.
You know, we see ourselves in the struggles and triumphs of characters like these, even if their lives are totally different from our own.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Living on Hopes and Dreams so relevant today.
Yeah.
It's not just about these two individuals.
Right.
It's about all of us.
Mm.
It asks us to look at our own biases or preconceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we were in Michael's shoes,
Yeah.
would we have done the same thing? Would we have been willing to take that risk knowing what could happen?
Those are tough questions.
Yeah.
And I like that the screenplay doesn't try to give us easy answers.
Right.
You know, it shows these complicated issues,
Mm-hmm.
but it leaves us with questions.
Yeah.
It leaves us wondering what the right thing to do really is.
And I think that ambiguity is intentional.
Yeah.
It reflects how messy the world really is. It's
Yes.
not black and white. We're always facing these ethical dilemmas,
Yeah.
trying to navigate a system that often feels unfair.
It makes you think about what our responsibility is in a world like this.
Right.
You know, what do we owe to people who are struggling?
Yeah.
How do we balance being compassionate with our own safety and the law?
So what does this all mean for the listener? What's the takeaway here?
For me, it's that we all have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We can ignore those who need help,
Mm.
protect ourselves, or we can choose to be compassionate
Yeah.
even when it's hard,
Yeah.
even when it means taking a risk.
And this screenplay shows that choice so well.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how big or small.
Right.
It can have a huge impact on us and the people around us.
It's a story that sticks with you.
Yeah,
It makes you think about your place in the world and what you believe in.
absolutely. So if you were in Michael's shoes,
Yep.
knowing the risks,
Uh-huh.
facing pressure from your family,
Mm-hmm.
would you have helped Miguel?
It's a good question.
What does your version of the American dream look like?
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Share them with us online.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.